we are back, baby, with the continuation of our Indiana Jones series. I already reviewed Raiders of the Lost Ark. If you didn't see it, check it out. It's a pretty awesome review. I feel like I'm pretty proud of it. But today, we are back with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Now, look, I already talked about how much these movies meant to me my whole life, especially when I was a kid. I had this movie. I had all four movies on DVD except for Temple of Doom when I was a kid. I had that one on VHS, and unfortunately I don't have it anymore. I sold it at a yard sale, and I regret doing that. But I must have watched that stupid VHS 1,000 times. Like, I loved this movie so much. And to this day, I love it just as much as I did when I was a kid. And now I have an even better appreciation for it now that I can look at it through the lens of an adult. And I know more about filmmaking now. Temple of Doom, it's interesting. My parents, when I was a kid, wouldn't let me watch PG-13. But this movie, plus Gremlins, was the reason why we got PG-13. Because they were too strong to be PG, but they weren't strong enough to be R. So they ended up getting PG ratings. And then when parents complained, PG-13 became Spielberg's idea. So I wasn't allowed to watch Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, even though I had already seen them 1,000 times. My parents wouldn't let me watch them anymore when they found out they were PG-13. But they were fine with me watching this one, oddly enough, even though this is clearly the most gruesome, violent one of the whole series. I would even sit in the family room and watch it in front of my parents. They had no issue with it just because it was PG. But I don't really get that, but that's just kind of the way my parents thought about it. And so I watched this movie over and over and over and over and over again, and I still love it just as much as I did when I was a kid. I remember the Lego set. If I can find a picture of it, I'll put it here. But there was a Lego set of the minecart chase, and it was $90. And of course, when I was a kid, I didn't, $90 was like $1 million. So I had a hard time saving up to get it. And then finally, I think I got $45, and I think my dad felt bad for me. He just went out and bought it, and then took my $45, which was awesome. And I love that Lego set so much. That was one of the best toys I've ever owned. Super cool Lego set. But needless to say, this movie has always meant a lot to me, and I've always had a good appreciation for it. I've never understood people who don't like this movie. If you came to this review expecting to see me bash this movie, I'm not. I love this movie. I think it's almost as good as Raiders. Not as good as Raiders, but I think it's almost as good as Raiders. And here's a super unpopular opinion. Are you ready for this? I am the first person you will ever hear say this ever. Temple of Doom is better than Last Crusade. Why? You will find out why I feel that way in my review for The Last Crusade. But enough about that. Let's get into it. So, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was released in 1984, is a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, takes place a year prior. And it stars Harrison Ford, Kate Capshaw, Ke Huy Quan, I apologize if I butchered his name, and Amrish Puri, and it was, of course, directed by Steven Spielberg. And in this movie, Harrison Ford and his child sidekick Short Round, end up with singer Willie Scott in India, and they think that they've been sent there to save them because their children have been kidnapped by an evil cult. And they took their sacred Shankara stones, which kept order in their village, and they send them on a quest to go get the stones back. Yeah, I think I've already pretty much said everything I need to say, so let's just get into the pros. One of the things I've always loved about this movie, and this might even be my favorite thing, is that this makes Indiana Jones a true hero. I think the tagline, or one of the taglines for this movie, was something like, Raiders made him a hero. This movie makes him a legend, or something like that. And I always thought that it was reversed, because in this movie, he is going on this mission to save these children who have been enslaved, to dig for the remaining Shankara stones. There's 5 of them. The Thuggee cult that are in Pankot Palace, they have 3 of them. And they have these children there that they've taken from the village to dig for the other 2 stones. And so he's there to rescue them. And I always thought that this one, of all the Indiana Jones movies, made him more of a hero than anything else. Like, this is the movie where I feel like you root for him the most, because what he's up against is just so incredibly evil and dark that you're really pulling for him more than I think in any other movie in the franchise. And Jones again has a great character intro. We get the cool dance sequence with Willie Scott, and then he walks into Club Obi-Wan, which I like that name, Club Obi-Wan, and he walks in and he sits down at the table with the Chinese gangsters and starts speaking Chinese, and you could tell he feels like he's on top of things because, you know, he might be a little bit of an egotistical guy, and then quickly he realizes he's not, he's been poisoned, and then he starts kicking some butt, and it's pretty awesome. I love that whole opening sequence. This movie is highly rewatchable because it's so well paced. Every movie in this franchise, including Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, has pristine pacing. This movie just keeps right on moving along. The only moment where it ever drags me even a little bit is the sexual tension scene between him and Willie. When I was a kid, I legit had no idea what they were talking about. But it might drag me a little bit there, but it very quickly picks back up with another cool fight scene. So this movie just moves right along, and it is highly rewatchable as a result of that incredible pacing. The action is incredible. Every action sequence in this movie is memorable. They don't blend in your head. They're not just senseless gunfights. There's always something unique there. Whether he's fighting a buff guy on a conveyor that's going to a rock crusher, or he's in a mine cart that's moving like 100 miles per hour, fighting thuggy cult members that are jumping into the cult and that are jumping into the car and running their car alongside. There's just everything about this movie is so memorable. When you watch this movie, there's so many things about it you won't forget. Every scene serves its purpose. Every scene is unique. Every scene is clever. Every scene is amazing. I love the booby trap sequence. It's so funny. And it's so intense. It's so suspenseful. I love it. And Harrison Ford really sells pain in this movie. That's one of the things I've always really appreciated about this movie. When he gets punched and he's gasping in pain, you feel that for him. Hi, doggy. Go lay down. You really feel that for him. He does a really, really good job at selling his pain that he's going through in this movie. The horror elements are fantastic. I love the heart getting ripped out scene. The special effects are amazing, and that's probably what won this movie the Oscar for Best Special Effects, and it still holds up to this day. This movie is terrifying, but when I was a kid, I was never afraid of this movie because I loved it so much. The violence is fantastic. This is a really violent, bloody, gory movie, and I like that. I wish we had more of that. That's something that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, even though I don't hate that movie, was seriously lacking. That movie needed more blood. It needed more horror. It needed more cool, edgy stuff. This is such an edgy movie. Like, the dinner sequence. You know, today that would be considered offensive, but of course I'm a normal person, so I'm not going to get offended on other people's behalf. But this movie has a hard edge to it, and that's one of the things that I really just love and appreciate about this movie. It's violent, it's bloody, it's scary. It's an action movie. I mean, it's a hard-edged action movie. Good. Why don't we get more stuff like that anymore? Probably because everything's offensive now, but still, I love it. And it's gross. I love the bugs. The bugs in this movie. The first movie did snakes. This movie did bugs. Of course, the dinner sequence is absolutely disgusting, but the bugs I love. And they're all real, obviously, because this movie's full of practical effects because it's the 80s. It was before CGI was a big thing, so they kind of had to use practical effects, and that's when movies were better. But I've read that they filmed those bug sequences in a studio, and the bugs had a tendency to escape, and people were reporting giant bugs smacking onto their windshields, which is pretty funny. I love the bug. Everything with bugs in this movie is just great. It's gross and it's awesome. It's also completely different from every other entry. This movie, amongst the pack, stands on its own. It proudly stands on its own. It doesn't have a whole lot of travel in it. They really only go from one place to the other And that's about it. It mostly, it's a little bit more confined, sort of like Return of the Jedi. You know, there's a lot more travel in the other two entries, but Return of the Jedi is a little bit more confined. And I don't mind that about this movie. I mean, yeah, you get the cool map transition sequence like you do in every movie, but once he gets into India, that's pretty much where he stays. And the movie, like I said, the pacing is just so good. It keeps moving right along that even though there isn't much travel in it, the pacing is still fantastic. The casting is great. Ke Huy Quan is like one of the best sidekick characters in cinema history. He is absolutely fantastic in this movie. He and Harrison Ford are adorable together. They are so good that you buy them as like these best friends. And I really, really wish we could get more Short Round in these movies. I don't know. Maybe he'll make a surprise appearance in Dial of Destiny. Who knows? But well, people who've seen it know. But I would love to see more Short Round. He's a great character. He's fantastic. Willie Scott, I know a lot of people don't like her. She doesn't have much depth to her. You don't really learn much about her. And a lot of people find her annoying, but I think there's sort of a charm to it. She's very, Kate Capshaw is very funny in the role, and I think she took a role that very easily could have been annoying and brought something endearing to it. And I think that was perfect casting. And of course, Mola Ram, one of my all-time favorite movie villains. That is a terrifying dude. Terrifying villain. Evil villain. Ruthless dude who so strongly, passionately believes in his cause. I love that villain so much. He's so evil. It's great. Let's see. Indy is also, once again, he's a complete and total bad A in this movie. One of my favorite moments from this movie. And this scene gets me hype every time I watch it. It's when he frees Willie from the drop down cage into the lava, and Short Round is freedom from the deep sleep of the Kali Ma, which by the way is awesome too. Everything about this movie is awesome. But this kid falls down and he's about to get whipped, and then you just see Jones standing there and he's just staring this guy down, and you know he's about to beat the crap out of him, and that fantastic John Williams score is blaring. Oh my gosh, I love it. He is such a great bad A character in this movie, and you just root for him all the way through. I also love how Indy is still humanized in this movie, because it seems like originally he only agrees to go to Bangkok Palace because really he was more interested in finding the stones. But then once he sees these children being enslaved, then suddenly he's very emotionally invested, and he picks up this rock and he throws it at the slave driver's head because he let his emotions get to the better of him. It's one of those things that still shows he's not a superhero, he's human, and he's more relatable because of that. And when I was talking about how this movie's scary, it's very creepy and it's eerie, and it does a great job at building up the villains before we actually meet them. Children. He says they stole their children. That is so eerie. It's perfect line delivery. When they approach the statue after they're riding on the elephants, and he finds this statue and it's got all these severed fingers on it, and there's still blood on them, and there's the bloody ear. Dr. Jones, what you look at? Don't come up here. Like, they do a great job at hyping up these villains before we really even understand who they are. The special effects are really, really good. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that heart sequence alone is what won this movie the Oscar. There's a few times that the special effects don't hold up. I'll get into that. But for the most part, the special effects in this are really, really good. They're practical. They're great. They're awesome. This is how you make a proper movie. Not with CGI, with real effects. Let's see. The set design is fantastic. I love the Temple of Doom. When they first walk in after they've escaped from the trap, and there's a ceremony going on, you see the giant statue with the chains hanging down in the cage, and the door that opens up to the lava has a skull on it. There's skulls everywhere. There's a giant lava pit separating the peasants from the higher ups in the thuggy cult. It is beautiful set design. The cinematography is fantastic. Everything's always in frame. The lighting is beautiful. The orange and red lights that they use in the Thuggy ceremony room, it is really, really beautiful to look at. The music, like I said, that fantastic John Williams score. This movie has one of my all-time favorite movie scores. I'm ashamed that I don't own a copy of it. It is so good. Slave Children's Crusade is one of the best movie scores I've ever heard in my life. Easily top 10 favorite movie scores ever. The humor is really good. This is a very funny movie compared to Raiders of the Lost Ark. I love the no-gun sword fight scene. When they're sort of making a callback to Raiders, he's running to the bridge, and he encounters two Thuggy cult members, and they have swords. And it's just him and those two. And he smiles, and he goes for his gun, and realizes he doesn't have it. It just sort of gives him a nervous smile now. And they come at him, and he kicks their butts, and he sends one of them running away, and because he got his sword, and he's got his whip, and he's running after him screaming, and then he comes up to the camera, and he just stops. And his happy expression just suddenly changes to fear, and he turns around and runs away. And then this giant horde of Thuggy cult come running into the frame after him. There's great stuff like that all throughout this movie. Let's see. See, the stunt work in this movie is really, really good. Just like compared to Raiders, there's really, really good stunt work in this movie. You got guys falling off of ledges and falling onto the ground. Like, they had this stuff like looks like it probably hurt. These stunt guys are to be applauded. They did a fantastic job. Let's see, and the finale. The bridge finale is one of my all-time favorite movie finales. Easily top 5 falling climax of a movie ever. When they get on that bridge and he cuts that bridge, Molaram, prepare to meet Kali in hell. And then they're all screaming in fear, trying to get off the bridge as he's cutting the rope, and the bridge falls in half. And then that fantastic John Williams score starts blaring up, and you see the crocodiles are eating the Thuggy cult members that are in the water, which really what that is that they just took costumes and fed them to crocodiles and filmed it. That's how they did that, by the way, in case you didn't know. And then they're all fighting to climb up the bridge, and Polaram and Indiana Jones are punching each other in the face. And he's trying to rip out his heart, and Indy removes his hand, and they get a hold of Indy's satchel that's got the stones in it, and he starts doing this ancient chant, and John Williams' fantastic score is blaring up. And then it burns through. It burns Molaram's hand. He gets the stone, and Molaram falls to his death, hits his head on the way down, and gets eaten by crocodile. It is absolutely fantastic. It is filmmaking at its best, and it is the type of filmmaking that I aspire to make. I one day dream I could ever make something even close to that good. It is filmmaking at its absolute best. And the costuming in this movie is fantastic. One of the things that this movie and Raiders and Last Crusade do really, really well is the characters get dirty. When Indiana Jones is out there on that bridge, you can see the blood stains on his back from where he had gotten whipped and tortured by the Thuggy. He's lost an entire sleeve. Like, you can see the hell that he's been through on his clothes. And that's something that I feel like is kind of lacking in a lot of movies today. Everybody just, like in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, everybody just looks so clean all the time. Like, no, the characters should be dirty and filthy. They've been through a lot. Their experiences in this movie should reflect on their clothing. I also love Evil Indy. Evil Indy is great. When that fantastic transitioning scene after they forced him, he took his jaw and they took a skull full of bewitched blood and made him swallow it, and then they throw him in this room with candles, and he's transitioning into the evil Indiana Jones, and he's screaming like Jim Carrey's impression of the Grinch, and then he sits up and he's like this, and he starts doing that evil laugh. Evil Indiana Jones, that's a genius idea. And then Indy, I love you. Ah! It's great stuff, man. And the ending is very heartwarming. When all the slave children come running in behind Indy, Willie, and Short Round, and their parents see them, and all their eyes light up, and they're all running to each other, and they're celebrating, and John Williams' great music is playing. It's one of the most heartwarming endings to a movie ever. This is absolutely one of the best movies I've ever seen. I have a couple of nitpicks with it. Like I said, some of the special effects don't really hold up. When you see them after the minecart sequence and they're holding on to the cliff outside and the water comes rushing in between them, you can tell that shot doesn't really hold up. And also, if you look underneath the bridge, this is something for some reason I've never seen anyone talk about, but the water, the whole thing is supposed to be completely flooded with water and crocodiles, but the water constantly disappears. In some shots it's there, some shots it's not. You can see what's actually underneath this real bridge that they filmed at. It's like there's not very much water. It's mostly a rocky terrain. It's not as deep. And it just constantly cuts back and forth between it being a further drop with water and alligators and what's actually there in real life. It's like they forgot to edit in the special effects and like a bunch of shots in that finale. But, oh, and I also, Harrison Ford got really, really ripped for this movie. Like, really ripped. And you can tell he's more buff than he was in Raiders. And this movie takes place a year before Raiders, which they did that because they couldn't figure out how to write out Marion. And they wanted him to be like James Bond and have a lot of girlfriends. So they just took it back a year. But I can clearly tell he's bigger than he was in Raiders. So I've always had a hard time buying that this actually takes place before Raiders of the Lost Ark, because I can tell that this would take place after, and that it should have taken place after. So unless Indiana Jones got depressed and lost a bunch of muscle mass in 1 year, it's a little bit hard for me to buy into it. But honestly, these are kind of nitpicks. You can, like I've always said, and I've always said this on this channel, and I'm going to continue to say, you can find something wrong with every movie. And I have a few little things with this, but overall, nothing that ever ruins my experience of this movie. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is one of the best movies I've ever seen. I love it every time I watch it. And of course, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom gets a 100. I wouldn't dare give it anything else. I know a lot of people don't like it. I think this is fantastic. Roger Ebert agreed with me, rest his soul. This is an amazing, amazing movie, and I love every minute of it. And I love this t-shirt, by the way. I found this yesterday, and I'm glad that I did. It's a great t-shirt. So, yeah. I have more Indiana Jones reviews coming. I apologize if I don't get to Last Crusade before I review Dial of Destiny, but we'll see what happens from here. But thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Pod Planetarian for more. Hit the like button. Leave me a review, suggestions in the comments down below. Seriously, if there's anything you want me to review, just let me know. I can't guarantee I'll do it, but I'll look into it at least. You know, if there's something you'd like to see me talk about, let me know. I'll think about it. And that's about it. Subscribe. And I wish you all fortune and glory.